In 1943, American women rolled out more military aircraft than the entire Axis powers combined. And that's just one small chapter in the strange saga of Rosie the Riveter. Welcome, brave viewers. Today, we're plunging into a world where ordinary women picked up drills and rivet guns to become icons of wartime heroism, an era that blurred the lines between the home front and the battlefield. It's a story as electrifying as it is true. Before we set off on this journey, allow me to kindly request your assistance. If you find yourself riveted by our tale, or if you simply admire the unstoppable force of teamwork, please pound that like button with all the subtlety of a pneumatic hammer. Now, gather around as we unearth the origins of one of history's most recognizable figures, Rosie the Riveter.
I go to college, but I arranged my classes so that I could help out in the war effort. This way I'll get my diploma and war bonds.
Our story begins in the early 1940s, when the world was plunged into the darkest conflict in human history. With the United States fully committed after the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, the nation's industrial capacity was cranked to unimaginable levels. Factories across the country roared to life with the single-minded goal of producing enough tanks, planes, and ships to overpower the Axis threat. In the midst of this manufacturing frenzy, a question arose. Who would fill the empty positions left behind by men shipped off to distant battlefields? In 1942, the War Manpower Commission and the Office of War Information scrambled to recruit new laborers. They launched a colossal propaganda campaign, urging able-bodied Americans to step up and do their part. While men were being conscripted into the armed forces, the propaganda machine shifted its focus to the previously untapped reservoir of working women. Flyers, radio jingles, and bold newspaper ads painted a picture of women in overalls, hair tied back, welding sparks illuminating their determined faces. But to truly unite the country behind this idea, they needed a symbol, one that would capture the strength, patriotism, and duty that women brought to the factory floor. In that same pivotal year of 1942, a fictional character emerged in a hit song by Red Evans and John Jacob Loeb. She was described as a tireless assembly line worker who always had a rivet gun in her hand, her face smudged with the grit of honest labor. The song's catchy tune and uplifting lyrics proclaimed, "All the day long, whether rain or shine, she's a part of the assembly line." This character was Rosie the Riveter. However, Rosie's fame didn't truly explode until 1943. That year, an artist named Norman Rockwell decided to bring her to vivid life on the cover of the Saturday Evening Post. Published on May 29, 1943. Rockwell's painting depicted a muscular, red-haired woman clad in denim. She balanced a rivet gun across her lap while casually stepping on a copy of Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf. On her lunchbox, in plain letters, read a simple name, Rosie. Rockwell's Rosie captured the imagination of the public, solidifying the idea of the tough, capable woman who would pound out the instruments of war and send them overseas. What many people don't realize is that the poster now most commonly associated with Rosie the Riveter, the famous "We Can Do It" design, was not originally labeled as Rosie at all. Created in 1942 by J. Howard Miller for Westinghouse Electric's War Production Coordinating Committee, it was meant to boost morale among factory workers. The poster depicts a woman wearing a red and white polka-dotted bandana, rolling up her sleeve. Although this image is now synonymous with Rosie, she wasn't named in that original poster. It wasn't until decades later that the "We Can Do It" image became intertwined with the Rosie character, merging two different depictions of wartime women into a single iconic identity. To understand why this symbol became so powerful, we must examine the cultural climate of 1943 and the years to follow. This was an era when traditional gender roles were being tested in ways previously unimaginable. By 1943, the draft had pulled over 10 million men into the armed forces, leaving behind a shortage of factory workers and a nationwide sense of urgency. Factories needed employees, fast. Suddenly, a respectable housewife working an assembly line wasn't a taboo. It was a patriotic duty. In cities across the nation, From Detroit to Los Angeles, women swapped their aprons for steel-toed boots. They learned to operate heavy machinery, rivet airplane wings, and weld the hulking steel plates of battleships. Many performed these tasks with alarming efficiency, shattering production quotas week after week. Although this shift of roles was initially met with skepticism, the results were undeniable. By 1944, nearly 1 out of every 4 married women in America was working outside the home. For many, this marked the first time they'd earned their own paychecks. The practical skills they acquired during the war years were about to change American society in profound ways. Behind the scenes, however, tensions simmered. While the government and corporations showered female workers with praise for their vital contributions, few made long-term plans for these women once the war ended. Some advertisements stressed that women were only keeping the seats warm for returning soldiers, implying that factories would be strictly male territory again once victory was achieved. For those who felt invigorated by their newfound sense of autonomy, Rosie's symbol was a beacon of hope and a sign of the battles that still lay ahead on the home front. Throughout the war, Rosie the Riveter was a powerful recruiting tool that brought over 6 million new female workers into American factories and shipyards. By 1945, that number would soar even higher. Newspapers ran headlines championing women as the secret weapon, attributing the Allies' massive production success to the resourcefulness of these new recruits. In that sense, Rosie was more than a poster. She was an embodiment of the flexibility, resilience, and determination the United States needed in its hour of danger. The official war ended with the surrender of Germany in May 1945 and Japan in August 1945. But for Rosie's image, the legacy had only just begun. After the war, countless women discovered that their brief, adrenaline-fueled stints in factories had awakened dreams of pursuing new careers, leaving the domestic sphere behind, or at least balancing domestic life with professional goals. Society began to shift, even if slowly, as the seeds of the modern women's rights movement took root. Still, Rosie remained quiet in the immediate post-war period. It wasn't until the late 1970s and early 1980s that her name would re-emerge. With the feminist movement gaining momentum, people started looking back at Rosie as a symbol of unshakable strength and female empowerment. Colleges printed, "We can do it," on t-shirts and posters. Marches featured signs bearing her unmistakable bandana and resolute gaze. Younger generations, who'd never heard the Wartime song or seen Rockwell's painting, now associated Rosie the Riveter with all women forging their own paths against the odds. As the decades rolled on, Rosie's image transformed yet again. She became a cultural icon, showing up in advertisements, political campaigns, and even parodies. Her legacy also sparked deeper conversations about inclusivity. Though the original Rosie posters often showed a white woman in a bandana, thousands of women from diverse backgrounds actually took on these grueling factory jobs. Historians have since worked to illuminate the stories of African American, Latina, Indigenous, and Asian American women who donned coveralls and kept the assembly lines humming. Each of their narratives weaves into the broader tapestry of Rosie's legacy, reminding us that courage and grit know no single face. Even today, the spirit of Rosie the Riveter resonates. Her raised arm and confident stare have become universal shorthand for "I can do this," reminding people everywhere that adversity can be tackled head-on. From t-shirts to coffee mugs to museum exhibits, Rosie endures as a testament to the heights that can be reached when society discards outdated limitations. In a time of crisis, she appeared as a fictional character, then transcended fiction to help change the real world. She bridged the gap between the horrors of a global war and the dream of a more equitable society. Though the rivet guns may have quieted and the factories repurposed, she remains a loud, riveting echo from the past, one that insists we can draw upon hidden reserves of strength whenever the need arises. And so, From the throes of World War II to the present day, the story of Rosie the Riveter reminds us that when circumstances demand it, ordinary people can tap into extraordinary power. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into Rosie's riveting tale. If you haven't already, let's see if we can fasten a few more rivets onto that like button, because each click helps these stories echo a bit louder in the factory of the unknown. Until next time, keep your eyes on the horizon, keep your spirits lifted, and remember, "We can do it" is more than just a slogan, it's a timeless call to action.